Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So I wanted to do the Q&A video. So first of all, thank you so much for posting all of your questions. If you do want to take part in this Q&A, definitely go and join the Discord. The server name is Appetite for the Dead. And yeah, I'll ask for some more questions after this Sunday's episode of The Walking Dead. But let's just get into the Q&A here. Actually, first I do want to mention, I want to say thank you to all that joined the stream last night because yeah, I just kind of decided to do a stream because I was like, I've been wanting to do a stream for a while, but I just really, honestly, it's so hard to find the time for a lot of that. But I've been thinking about doing like weekly streams on Sundays just because The Walking Dead drops there. And honestly, Sundays, I have a lot of time to do stuff like that. And I will be doing that. So this Sunday, I will be live and yeah, we'll do another Q&A and we'll talk about the latest episode 4 and whatnot, obviously, after I get my review and everything out. And yeah, I hope to see you there. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Q&A, is there any chance we will see Jeffrey Grimes on screen for the first time? I think the whole thing with Jeffrey Grimes is going to be something that, honestly, it's kind of hilarious. So before what Carol said in the last episode, I feel like not a lot of people really talked about it too much. Like I've done videos on it, obviously, over the last couple of years or whatever, because, it just kind of made sense, especially once Daryl was like confirmed to be going to Spain. I was like, wait, what's going on here, right? And there wasn't a lot of talk about it because a lot of people were like, well, it's just kind of ridiculous to think that that would happen. And like, I get why, like it makes sense, right? And then Carol says that. And so now there's a lot of people talking about this being a possibility, but I'm still kind of in the same place as I've always been. Like, I think it would be cool to happen, but I don't think they're going to do it. And after what Carol said, I don't even think it really confirms that it's Rick's brother potentially. Like maybe, but like she could literally be talking about anybody because who's Carol's friend? It could literally be anyone. It could have been someone from before the apocalypse. Like, oh, I had a friend whose brother, lived in Barcelona before the apocalypse or whatever she said there. Like, like it could literally be anyone. And so, I guess to answer your question, could we see Jeffrey Grimes? I don't see it personally. I really do think that that line is going to be something that is literally just an Easter egg for, comic book fans. And that's pretty much it. I think that it's almost equivalent in a way to what Carol said, about the whoever came back or whatever. I think it's very similar in that sense where it's just going to get a lot of people talking, but it's not going to really lead anywhere. And I think in this situation, I think it's a little bit more, I guess understandable because of it's literally just referencing the comics and it's kind of a funny mention, right? I think the whole thing about whoever came back, that was definitely really frustrating because like they knew what they were doing. It was all before like the Ones Who Live and everyone was wanting to see the characters reunite and everything. So that was very specifically like, okay, you're trying to get people really excited about this and it literally meant nothing. I think the whole Jeffrey Grimes thing it's just more fun, right? And I think it's kind of an Easter egg for the comic. And so do I think we will ever see Jeffrey Grimes? I personally don't believe so. Q&A, what's your prediction with the Triple P since they show up again in Daryl Dixon? Any connections with the CRM, a cure, a new massive bad group that's way more bigger than the CRM? I hope that that's what happens. Honestly, I hope that the Triple P card means something bigger than we could really imagine in terms of, the scale of a lot of stuff. Because like that was a really exciting storyline. When stories get really big like that, it was really exciting because it was just something that like, again, with The Walking Dead, you want to build bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And I know that it's something that as a writer, you don't really want to get into things like that because I've always said it's sort of like the Dragon Ball Z effect, right? Like every single villain afterwards or every arc has to be, crazier than the last arc. And the villains have to keep getting stronger and stronger. And then your heroes have to keep getting stronger and stronger. And so you end up at a point where it's like, well, how strong can you really go? And then you end up at a point where it's like, well, I guess now you're just, Super Saiyan. Well, I guess 4 is sort of where they went, I guess. Well, in Dragon Ball Daima, right? Although I guess in Super, Goku did go like Ultra Instinct or whatever. So that's kind of what I mean, though. And then you get the whole universes battling and all that. Anyways, not going to get into all that. That's kind of my point, though, is like, I think that when it comes to The Walking Dead, it has to follow almost a similar thing like that. And I think that's why Dead City specifically is suffering, at least in the first 2 seasons, because the story went so small that it just didn't really connect a lot of things. And it was just so different from everything that it just didn't feel like it was connected at all to The Walking Dead or like any bigger story, right? So there's nothing that's really exciting. And so like when things are connecting a lot and like, oh, this could mean this and it's so exciting and like, you know what I mean? Like that's where it's so much fun because I think that's what made Fear the Walking Dead a lot of fun. Like that whole, arc with, I guess, Teddy and, the bunker and all that stuff. Like when that nuke went off, it was exciting because it was like, wow, this is actually like it's a nuclear apocalypse, happening in The Walking Dead. And we were all wondering what it was going to mean for, everything else. And also, there was the whole Padre thing. Like that was before we knew what Padre actually was, which I do think they just changed that. Honestly, I think they were teasing a lot of stuff beforehand. And it was exciting to think of like, there's a lot of like this government stuff that's happening, or at least there was, before the apocalypse happened. And maybe Rick and everyone else are going to find out all this stuff. And like, that's the direction that I feel like all of this should be going in, especially because you have like a couple of years left, I feel like, with, this era or with these characters before they either do a reboot or like, a different like next generation story or whatever. And like, that's the thing. You want to build the story up that big, and then the next generation show could start off small again. I think that that's why the Triple P card storyline has to be bigger than the CRM, because honestly, it was teased around the same time as all the CRM stuff, and it's been a thing just sort of throughout. And so I hope that it is a lot bigger than the CRM, but it's one of those things where I feel like it really does come down to, whether or not AMC tells Gimple, like, you have to do this or that, because I feel like Gimple, and honestly, it's just my personal opinion, but I feel like he'll just let things go on for as long as he can to have things a little bit more successful or to keep things really exciting, And so storylines like that, take a really long time, and then maybe, there's not a lot of interest, and then no one cares anymore, right? So I think that, AMC, if anything, they have to be like, all right, you got to start telling more of this story, or we got to see more of this. But like, I don't know how much say they have in that, or if they really, pay attention to a lot of things like that. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But I'm just hoping that it is definitely bigger than the CRM storyline, and that, yeah, I just hope that it is. Q&A, there's one heartbreaking part of the later Walking Dead comics that the TV universe has never touched, and that being when Rick was forced to shoot Dwight. Is it possible that the reason that we're now seeing Daryl find so many meaningful connections in Europe and ultimately changing as a person, that we're eventually leading to a future where Rick and Daryl are on different sides of some massive scale conflict? This would be such a risk if either killed one another, but yeah. So I think that something like that, I mean, yeah, obviously that would be absolutely insane. I feel like if Rick and Daryl were on, the opposite sides of some sort of conflict, whatever it is, if it's something to do with, the group that Daryl is with right now, and then something that comes up, I guess in America. Like, I'm not sure, a lot of us thought that maybe that would be like Madame Genet's group in the CRM or whatever, but obviously that's not what's happening anymore. I think that that would be really interesting. I don't know if we'll ever get something like that. I do think getting that scene would be cool, though. Definitely. I remember talking about that a lot, actually, in towards the ending of season 11, because obviously that's when it happens, right? It's during the Commonwealth arc, and like wondering who would get that storyline, like who would die and take Dwight's place. I think it would be so cool to see something like that. Again, I don't know who would have to take that place, because it has to be a character where that character is literally like was already having issues with Rick, started to like him a little bit, and then, obviously didn't trust him in the end. Because that's sort of how Dwight felt in the comic, was like, Dwight had a lot of issues with Rick, but then eventually was like, you know what, you're cool or whatever. And then there was some issues happening towards the ending of the Whisperer War and everything, and then Dwight was just like, he didn't really trust him too much. And then the Saviors came back and all that. I won't get into all of that, but it has to be something similar. And so it would have to be a character like that, maybe had some issues with Rick and then eventually started to trust him a little bit, but then, things were changing a little bit as, this new group has different rules, and Rick's like, but I have to side with this group because the best thing for, my family and everyone here. And so, like, that would have to be something I would honestly have to build up a lot. And I don't know if, obviously it's kind of too early to know right now if that's what the reunion show would actually get into, but Q&A, do you think the Triple P card is a reference to a spy of the CRM? That would be really cool. I really feel like the whole Beale spy thing could come back at some point, because I feel like that's one thing that a lot of people are just like, well, that's not going to come back up anymore, right? Because the CRM thing is kind of done. But I do think as time is going on here, once they announce that Rick is coming back, I think having the CRM story there is going to be pretty exciting again. I think a lot of people just don't like how it ended, but honestly, they can definitely fix a lot. Like, The Walking Dead has been in a lot of places where things have just been really bad. and then they'll fix things and things get a lot better. So I think that's likely going to happen in some way. I think if the Triple P card was a reference to the spies of the CRM, that would be really cool. Like, there's got to be some kind of connection, right? It has to mean something. Q&A, do you think the king could have some connection to Madame Genet with the variant walkers, or possibly the people we saw in episode 1 with the armor? If that's not King Torres' community, love all your content. Thank you so much. I don't think that is King Torres' community. I think that group is definitely something different, and we'll learn a lot more about them in episode 4. So I would have to say that I feel like there's probably no connection. I think that Madame Genet is just, like maybe she knows of, I guess King Torres and like other leaders and whatnot, right? But I think as of right now, it's hard to say, honestly. I don't know how much they want to connect all of that. Q&A, where do you think the rest of the season is going, and who is your favorite character so far? I would say, obviously I have to ignore Daryl and Carol. Out of all the characters so far, I really like Fede, I would say the most, but honestly, there hasn't been a lot of scenes with him, so it's hard to say. I think Roberto is kind of a cool character, although, like, there's some issues I have with the character, but, like, I think he's overall fine. Justina is a really interesting character, but I don't know where her story is going to go overall. I feel like we just learned all the characters' names, and we're learning a little bit more about the personalities and like getting into some of that, but we don't know the characters that well yet. So I think by the end of the season, I'll know like who's my favorite characters out of all the new characters. But as of right now, I would have to say the character that seems the most interesting because of all the things that are happening is Fede, because he's the leader of this community. Justina was just taken away, and just all of that, right? Like, there's a lot of issues there. Now he's probably going to want Daryl and Carol to leave. I mean, obviously he does. There's just a lot of things happening there where, he's a really interesting character, and I'm really fascinated to see what they do with him for the rest of the season. Anyways, I'm gonna leave it here though, so definitely post all your thoughts down below, and any questions that you do have. Again, thank you so much for posting all of your questions. I really enjoyed doing this, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one.